One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse, such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, Warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. Today, I sit down with my guest, Melissa, for a really honest and vulnerable conversation. We talk about our own traumas, how those experiences can shape the way we move through the world, and how deeply they can affect our sense of self-worth. Melissa closes our conversation with a powerful message centered on self-love, self-forgiveness, and reclaiming your self-worth. Here's Melissa. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to One in Three, and thank you for joining me.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I am too, and I'm at the edge of my seat to figure out what we're going to talk about. Just before I hit record, Melissa and I were talking about how I did not take any notes on what we were going to say, and I just put down "come as you are." So whatever that means, we're going to do it.
Well, probably I think we probably talked a lot about, a little of everything and a lot of nothing. That's how my conversations tend to go. So who knows?
But all right, but we'll figure it out. So before we get into our whatever we're talking about today, could you give a little background so we can all get to know you some?
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't give short-winded answers. I'm so sorry. So forgive whatever's about to come out of my mouth because it comes out different every time I answer this question. Let's see if I can make this succinct. Okay. I was in the hospital by 2 months old from a failure to thrive diagnosis when really it was just neglect because my parents were putting orange juice in my bottle. And that is a very good representation of how the next 18 years of my life went. Um, my parents were addicts. In my little unit, I had two brothers, one above me, one below, like a year, little stair steps. May of 79, me, June of 80, my brother, August of 81. My mom was very young. My dad was not much older than her. He had other children outside of that relationship before and after, but my unit was us three. We did a lot of back and forth between outside foster care, kinship foster care with my grandparents, and then eventually just my grandma because my grandpa left too. And then when I was about 8 years old, my mom decided that she was done, like, essentially torturing us with her attempts at sobriety because it didn't last long. And bless her, I mean, truly, I don't know how it could have, because in the 80s, reunification was done very differently. And like, you can't give someone three children with now needs because of the trauma they've experienced when you've got 5 seconds of sobriety. Like, that would never be done now. And she got zero outside support, just a lot of requirements. So there wasn't like therapy given to her. There wasn't parenting skills. There were parenting classes that sucked then. I hope they're better now. But she just really didn't stand a chance, if I'm being honest. So the relationship between my mom and my dad was violent, very, very violent. They ended up never like really talking again after I was about 6, but a lot of the violence really was my mom. My dad did very horrible things. I'm not going to say he didn't, but I do think she had that thing where she couldn't feel safe with anything calm, and alcohol made her psycho. So like, I saw her initiate a lot of the violence. And then, once he didn't drink anymore and was away from my mom, he was never violent again, to my knowledge, because he was more of like an opiate guy. And then my mom was in relationship after relationship of domestic violence, of either her being the perpetrator or both the receiver and the perpetrator. So it was a really tumultuous time. And then my dad died when I was 15 of a morphine overdose. And then my mom died when I was 22 and pregnant with my first child. of complications related to hepatitis C and cirrhosis. And that was kind of the beginning for me. I left my grandma's house at 18 thinking, yeah, I don't think my childhood really had an impact on me because I wasn't living my pain out loud in the way that my siblings were. And so I thought that was the only way to measure whether or not something had like this deep, profound impact on you. And I had a grandma with lots of narcissistic traits who was constantly minimalizing my experience because I wasn't looking a certain way. I was the golden child. I was doing everything I could to get love and belonging in the way that I knew how. And so I really had to fight for space to have feelings because it was like, what do you, that really affected your brothers because they started running away and doing drugs and blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't doing any of that. And so after my mom died, I felt like I really, in some ways, I did put childhood to rest at that point because my focus really became the impossible task of being the perfect parent. And that was like my main focus. And then I kind of just trucked along doing my very best without any understanding of trauma. And then at 43, reached profound darkness, like burnout in a way that just left me making a plan to die because I had no skills to deal. I mean, and to be clear, I was a licensed social worker at the time, still am, but like but that this wasn't the stuff I was learning. And so yeah, now I'm kind of here on the other side of all of that and having figured out how all of those things did impact me profoundly and teaching others through my story.
Yeah, I think it's that trauma can be defined in so many different ways from when you're a kid. It can be
Mhm.
neglects. I mean, you mentioned neglects, but then
Yes.
you're also witnessing actual domestic violence, but that like rewires your brain, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're the you know more about this than I do.
No, I'm sure I don't. Like no, I'm this is that's the thing is that like everything I've learned is like self-learning and like I don't come to these conversations as any kind of expert. Truly, this is my human experience. My book learning did not prepare me for figuring out how to want to live.
Yeah. Well, is that complex trauma, am I right? Is that the
Yes.
trauma that you
Yes.
experience as a child that sort of sets your pathways or your path, whatever, for the rest of your future? All of the person you become is related to all of that trauma that you
Yeah.
experienced.
Yeah, I mean, it's complex because it's not just a singular event or a short period of time. It was literally 18 years. I mean, I did not have a day of peace that entire childhood. Then, even after 18, I'm getting calls from my mom. My boyfriend pushed me off the roof of this place. I almost died. I'm alive, but my hip is shattered. I'm having my hip replaced. Calls from the emergency room. Hey, your mom's here. And I don't even remember what happened to her that time, but I don't think it was super serious, but wanting me, an 18-year-old, to come and pick her up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and getting into a kind of an aggressive argument with the nurse because I was like, honey, it's 3 a.m. I'm not coming to pick her up from the ER. And she's like, well, what are we supposed to do? And I was like, you recognized and acknowledged when I picked up the phone that I am her daughter. I'm not her mother. You can call her mother or you can send her to detox. You can do whatever, but I'm not picking her up. I don't know where you're going to discharge her. It, call after it was always, I mean, even just those middle of the night phone calls. In my first book, I told a story about going to a crack house to get her out. This was post hip injury. She's still recovering. And I showed up and because she called me crying because a man was hurting her. And at this point, I have such bravado and lack of concern for my own safety that I'm walking up in there and spooking a whole bunch of crackheads because they're like, who are you calling? Da 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 da. That wasn't nice. But in my 18-year-old brain, they were crackheads. They were the enemy. You know what I mean? But like, um they're all jumping up like, who are you calling? Because I'm calling my grandma to like apprise her of the situation and which hospital we're going to, and then having to like tell my mom to like, hey, do you have anything on you because you're about to go to the hospital? And she's like, yeah, and then letting her go hide her crack pipe in a drainage ditch. I mean, like, there was not an ounce of peace. I mean, truly, at the moment when she died, she was incarcerated, and we had probably a year and a half of just peace within our relationship because there are opportunities to use in prison, but she chose not to. She really was working through a rehabilitation kind of path, and trying school again, and things like that. So really we were able to work all of it out. Like, there was nothing left unsaid at the time that she was in an emergency health crisis and transported to the emergency room. And we had 3 weeks of ups and downs, and then she did ultimately die. But now I forgot where I was going with that. I'm sorry. Oh, at the end of that 3 weeks, when it was very obvious that this was probably not going to go the way we wanted to, I was pregnant again, like very early first trimester with my first. Like, I remember just like throwing up outside the hospital one day. And I remember kind of thinking like, I'm okay letting go if she's just going to get out and do this again. Like, because I had hinged so many hopes upon her rehabilitation and release, right? Like, I'm her kid. I'm never going to stop hoping that things get different or better for us. And so I remember just thinking, like, I think maybe this is for the best. Like, let's let her go in peace at a really good time for us, like, where there are no apologies needed. Like, we are in such a solid place. And I know for sure I will not let her do that to my children, get to know her and love her, and then be betrayed by her over and over. And so I just got like really at peace with the idea of like, I think maybe it's just time to let this go. And so then it was kind of like, oh, all of these things come up over and over and over when you're raising your own children, just the narratives and trying to like, what was crap and what was not, and most of it was, and is there anything I should hold on to?
That is too much. I mean, did
Right.
you like that's are you aware if your mom had any of her own trauma before
Oh
she became a
God,
mother?
yes. Yes, so much. So my grandpa, that's why I was so when my grandpa divorced my grandma, I was like 11 years old. Up till then, he had only like spoken to me a couple of times in my life, and I lived in the same house with him. Like, horrible person. So they had 5 children together. My mom was the baby. My grandma was a very, very unhealed person also. I mean, he was like 23 when my grandma married him, talked her into fudging stuff and running away from home at 15 years old from Virginia to Oklahoma. So my grandma married him. Domestic violence started on the way to Oklahoma, like horrible domestic violence. My grandpa was a sadist, truly, and a lot of other things. And then she got pregnant immediately. I don't, you know how that goes. And so he's abusing her. She's pregnant. They have 5 kids. My mom's the youngest. So much stuff happened to them in their childhood. And then my mom meets my dad when she was 14. And the cycle continued. And my dad and her were violent. Lots of violent things happened to her because of the company she was keeping. Not because I'm not blaming her, but she was surrounded by people who were just out of their mind on drugs all the time. Um, I can't really even like describe it because most of the information I have about that time in her life is from my grandma who hated my dad. And so that was the way she like kind of painted that whole thing. It was supposedly like biker gang situation. I don't really know. She said so much that I just don't know is true, and I wasn't brave enough to like clarify with my dad before he died. So, but yeah, my mom, bless her heart, she really like she had so much trauma, so much, and then even more post my dad. I mean, it was like traumatic situation after traumatic situation. I mean, bless her heart, she didn't have a day of peace either.
Yeah, that's so common, right? When you have a
Mm-hmm.
parent who's lived such trauma and they're unhealed from that trauma. And I'm not this isn't like a get out of jail free for abusers that, oh, I
Right.
had this abusive past, so I get to abuse then
Right.
too. But it's instances like that of just this unhealed trauma and then so young to start having a family at such a young age. You're still a kid yourself for both your mom and your
Which is
grandmother.
also a trauma in itself to be a teenage
Yes.
mother. And, just as a caveat here, like you're hearing me tell this story from a place of having made peace with the fact that these were who my caregivers were. You know what I mean? Like, there, listen, a year ago, I was still raging about my narcissistic grandma. I mean, that piece has just recently come. My mom, I've been able to give her a little bit of an easier time over the last probably 7 years or something. My dad, because he's been gone so long, but he had his own trauma. I mean, sexual abuse, both of them, like so much stuff. So yeah, I didn't give any of them a pass, which I'm not saying to you. It's more like, hey, if you're still raging at your parents or your abuser or whatever, that's where you're at, man. That's all right. I'm not going to tell you to be any different, but this is, for me, it's been just like, each step of healing has allowed me to release a lot of that pain, because for me, healing has been so much of just coming home to myself, um learning that unconditional love and positive regard for me, which allows me to extend so much compassion to myself for anything. And then as you grow into that, you start to see how, like, the people who have done things really aren't that different than you at all. And I'm not that different than anyone else. And believe me, I was, verbally abusing my spouse before healing, and probably emotionally, and have done plenty of emotionally abusive things to my family, not on purpose. Had no idea that that's what I was doing. I just knew I was protecting myself, you know? So if I'm going to learn to forgive myself, that, which is literally the hardest thing to do, is to forgive yourself, then it's very easy for me to extend that to my caregivers, because they had their own stories,
Yeah. And it's if you carry that hate, so you're looking at your parents, the ones who and your grandmother, but you look at any victim who's suffered any form of neglect or abuse. I guess neglect is
Mhm.
actually abuse, but it's easy to carry that resentment and that hate, but
Mhm.
then it also weighs you down and it makes it more difficult to heal, like you said, yourself. And yeah, I mean, there's a space for the hate and the resentment, and I think that you need to feel that. You shouldn't ignore it. By all means, feel
Right.
it, but then also understand that if you harbor that, that just lives inside you. So what do you think, considering the trauma that the generational trauma of your family, how did you how does one recognize it? How does one break through or break free of that and decide, I don't want this cycle to continue on. I need to heal myself. How did you come about, I guess, recognizing that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to give you a really woo woo answer to this. So,
I love
when
it.
I was like 4 or 5, one of the times my mom had left and went wherever it was she went, she had been gone a few weeks, and I was at my grandma's, and I was crying because I missed her, and I was kind of praying and just kind of desperate to feel better. And I just remember hearing, like, this is going to be a part of your story, but you don't have to be this. Like, you take this and you do what you need to do with it, but you're going to change the world with this. And now, looking back, now with my current set of beliefs in spirituality, I really feel like that was my highest self, just like walking me through, you know. And I had other circumstances like that too. When I was like 14, I was at middle school, and I saw this like Miss Oklahoma type lady giving a speech in the gym to some younger. classes, and just telling her story, and it's a motivational speaker type thing. And I like was overwhelmed with this like vision of my life, and like, okay, girl, so your parents are going to die. This was the year before my dad died. Your parents are going to die. Like, you're going to use your story, blah, blah, blah. Same kind of affirmation of like what I was told when I was younger. Again, I think it was just my higher self, but it was like this like spiritual download that it was like wild. That I didn't really talk about for a long time because, schizophrenia is in my family. So I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. But, yeah, so those two things combined, but also I operated from a place of spite forever until healing. And so, okay, I told you my grandma had 5 kids. 4 of them were women. Unhealed women are cruel, okay? So then these 3 little aunts of mine, I spent a lot of time being just criticized to death, either talking about me, to me, whatever. And somewhere along the way in childhood, I was like, you know how we're going to do this? I'm going to be better than every one of you. And part of my protective factor really was putting on this armor of like, I'm going to be the first. I'm going to be the best. So a lot of golden child type stuff, like, if I can achieve, I'm worthy of love and belonging. But really from this place of spite, like, I'm going to show you. Because also when we were put in official kinship foster care with my grandma, we received a lot of education, and so I got a lot of statistics shown to me about what is likely to happen to foster girls, by the time they're 18. And so I was like, oh hell no. So between like wanting to prove the statistics wrong and wanting to prove my family wrong, that was the fire that lit me. Like, truly, I was motivated by spite so much. It drove me. I wanted to be the first to go to college in my family. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about on my dad's side of the family. I always have to say that in case they like it. I'm scared to talk about them, so like, I don't want them to hear me say that and then come for me, okay? But and I don't really even think about them as part of family. I like my little nuclear family was my mom's side, but yeah. So I was the first, and I was the first to get an associate's. I was the first to get a bachelor's. I was the first to get a master's, and then I've only had, I think, one of my aunts did nursing after I got my master's. I think that's it still. I can't remember, but I mean, I think that's it. So like that was a huge force for me. It's like, yeah, and I'm better than you guys. And I did think I was. I mean, truly. Like, but how else are you going to protect yourself and like also judge success unless you can compare it to your family, Like that's that, but that was the only way I operate. I didn't know how to have any sort of authenticity in my life. So that was long-winded. I'm sorry, Ingrid, but yes, that's how.
I mean, we're both long-winded. That's why I don't have any notes. We were probably too busy talking. And I guess that's why we both have podcasts, right?
Yep.
Well, I was going to say that the unhealed women are vicious, so vicious.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. And if you look at serial killers, I believe that most serial killers had shitty moms.
Oh,
And
absolutely. No, for
and
real.
right. And this is not, I'm not trying to downplay a gender and say that women belong in the kitchen and are supposed to tend to the children, but genetically, we are the caregivers. We are the ones who are supposed to nurture, and where babies, children, young adults learn coping skills and comfort from their moms. And when you don't have that, that can lead to a whole mess of things. And, for you, it sounds like you just happen to have better insight and you were open more to the universe, your higher self,
Yeah.
whatever it is that people want to say it is. That I think if you allow yourself to be more open to things, you are going to feel whether you have that schizophrenic voice telling you what
Right.
it is,
Yeah.
or a sensation of what you're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
do, or what your purpose is.
Yeah, I mean, and at the time I would have said God. I was super religious, grew up in Oklahoma. Like at 18, if anyone had asked that question, I'd be like, God did it for me. He got me through. But yeah, I think I felt that sense of purpose very, very young. Like in some ways, I'm so glad to have had some of the exposure I did to the Bible. I have lots of religious trauma, but some of the stories, like I remember being really affected by the King Solomon story, which now is kind of just whatever. But I wanted to be wise. I wanted to look beneath the surface from a very young age. I didn't want Probably some of that was protection. I didn't want to be fooled by people. But I wanted to be wise and I wanted to be patient. That's been a lifelong journey. But yeah, and also, to your point, I think women are a byproduct of a very messed up system. So, like all of us have our own unconscious stuff that we're just giving to our kids, to our friends, to our family, whatever, because of the system that we have been put in and the limits and whatever of that system. But yeah, I think whether or not women or mothers should be the like sole person to provide that love, that nurturing, that care, a child craves that from their mother. So what I've learned about my trauma and trauma in general really is about the fact that it doesn't even matter what the trauma was. It was who showed up when you experienced it. How did they help you through it? Like I hate when people hear my story and then feel the need to minimalize their trauma. No, honey, the whole point is none of us, if let me make this very clear, if you are Gen X, elder millennial, or older, nobody cared about you or for you the way you deserved. Period. Period. And
Period.
so, whether it was you messed up the first word at your spelling bee and was like horrified by that, and everyone told you to quit being a crybaby, or someone made you like always be way too huggy with strangers or distant relatives, whatever the case was. And I mean, it's all of the above for most of the women out, like that, the age group I'm saying, whatever it is, nobody had anyone to come in and help them through those pivotal emotional developmental milestones, and that's the point. So yes, crazy moms will beget some crazy children. I mean, I really labeled myself very crazy for so long because my brain was so loud and so ugly for so many years. But I think it's because we were begging for something that no one had the capacity to give.
Yeah. And as a Gen Xer myself, I will say I remember with COVID, we all thought we've got this. We've been alone our entire lives.
Right.
We know how to seclude. Was there a moment where you thought you needed to actively try to heal yourself?
Yeah. Okay, so in about 2016 or 17, I started to hear about trauma, okay, and like nervous system regulation. And God knows I gave it the old college try. I really did, because I knew I was like a spaz and kind of psycho. Like I was just, in better terms, I was an extremely reactive person. But I didn't like understand that I was so dysregulated because there was this emotional component and I didn't even know how to unpack any of that. So I trucked along until, I hit the mental health crisis and then literally wanted to die, and then knew that if I wanted to live, something had to give. Like I didn't know what that was, but the things that I did know that were very tangible was I hated my job. And I mean, when I say hated, well, I was working in education, and education is a very difficult field for so many reasons. But the primary reason for me was the unhealed women, and the toxicity that created for me personally was just, I just reached capacity and I couldn't anymore. So I knew I needed to leave the job. I left the job. I started to try to tap into any creative resources that I had within myself to learn how to like live in a flow state. Like truly from about November of 2023 to June 24, I was just doing my best. I was just trying really hard to figure it out. But I started my podcast at the end of April in 2024. And it was such a gift because the guests that came on kind of helped me so much. But the first one that really just like blew my whole world wide open and changed my life forever. Her name is Jenny Kempton, and she lives in Arizona. She's a cousin of my husband, actually, but I found her on Facebook, and um, I had her on. She works for a guy named Troy Love in Arizona who developed the Finding Peace method and wrote this book called the Finding Peace Workbook. And so I happened to see her as like a people you may know because I had just like accepted a friend request, I guess, from her brother. And I looked on her page and there was only one public post and I was just like, "Ooh, I want to talk to her." So I asked her to be on the show, having no idea what we would talk about, but you know the early days when you're like begging people to come on.
Yeah.
And it does, and the show has no real rhyme or reason. You're just begging people to come on and have a conversation with you. Like I wanted it to be about vulnerability in the beginning, but like because that was literally the only thing I had was learning to be vulnerable. I had no idea like what else was wrong with me. So anyway, Troy broke shame down into different archetypes, much like internal family systems. And I think that's probably where he drew this from, if I were to guess. But that did it. That was the piece that just like helped me so much because I finally understood that shame was what was creating all the noise in my head. Shame. Because I was this incredibly reactive person. And that was the part I carried so much shame about because my grandma tortured me about it my whole life. Like, you're so mean. You have the darkest heart. You're not a good person. Your brother's a better person than you are. He'd give the shirt off his back and you're selfish and you're blah, 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 blah. Because I had boundaries, you know. And so all the shame that I carried, and then as it got worse, just like, the times I'm screaming at my children, I'm just hearing all the shame narratives, but they would fight with each other, the little archetypes. It'd be like, "Melissa, you know better." And then the royal would come in and be like, "Yeah, but I wouldn't have done that if they hadn't done blah, blah, blah." And then the judge wants to come back and be like, "Yeah, but," and then there's these other archetypes. It's a whole thing. And I was like, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. Oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. Like there's an actual explanation for what is happening. And then it also breaks down kind of the development of your wounding. It helps you like unpack. Like I remember crying through the loss section because of course I've had so much loss in my life, but I had never really stopped to like hold the fact that I lost so many possessions throughout my childhood, like I remember one Christmas, my grandma was really sweet about always making sure we had Christmas, like no matter who we were with. And one Christmas we had all the stuff. And then, because we were left unsupervised a little bit, I think she was passed out in the bedroom. My brothers and I kind of just burnt our house down because there was a stove, the electric stove, and my mom was using it to heat the house. And the coil will get red on the electric stove. And we were walking past, I think we had been cleaning even. We were like 4, 5, and 6, or 5, 6, and 7, but I think 4, 5, and 6. My older brother and I were walking past. I'm pretty sure we'd been cleaning, and we were like, "Oh no, the stove is red. Like that's gonna make mom really mad." I know. I'll put this newspaper over it and cover it, and then we won't be in trouble. Having no idea that that's going to start a fire. Well, it did. And then we had way too much fun with the fire, and there went the house.
Too much fun
Yeah,
with the fire.
we really did. It was kind of, and then also the guilt I felt over that. Like, oh, there was so much related to this one incident that just like I had to like figure out and process. But all of those things that we had, like we had had a brand new bunk bed, all these things like just gone. Or, my grandma comes to a house that we lived in with my mom and realizes we've now been here a week by ourselves because mom left. And so she has to pack us up. she can't pack this entire house up, and there goes every ounce of our belongings. So things like that happened a lot, and just never processing it left this huge loss wound. And then both my parents are dead. So like, and then my grandma died, and there's all this stuff. And so just even, I mean, it wasn't like painful. It was just like, oh, that, that hurts a little bit to think back, and wow, I'm relieved to see how this wound was made. And I learned that betrayal was my biggest wound. Betrayal, and then neglect is a close second, where I had recognized at certain points in arguments with my husband where it felt like betrayal, but that didn't make sense. Like, why does you not taking my opinion over someone else's feel so much betrayal? And so what I would do, instead of trying to figure that out, is just rage and start a fight, because I knew what to do with that. And then we could calm down. I could apologize for my behavior. That would be the resolution to the argument. Nothing was really fixed ever, but continue on until the next fight. But betrayal consumed me. It was every minute of every day. And that's why I kind of realized, like, oh, anyone in my generation is going to have a big betrayal wound, because we created all these expectations, and that's just what we did. It's what we were taught, honestly, because we were raised by also a bunch of codependent and meshed people pleasers too, who taught us to value the comfort of others over our own peace. And so what we do is we run around loving people in the way that we want to be loved, and when we do that, we're creating a social contract full of expectations. So the second that expectation isn't met, betrayal. Well, honey, if you have all these unrealistic expectations, then you're going to feel betrayed all the time. And then neglect, for me, I feel like neglect carries this narrative of, I have the weight of the world on my shoulders and no one to help me carry it. First of all, a lot of times that's true in childhood, when we had these parents who didn't, you know, want to know how to meet us where we were. Be brave, quit crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. All the little sayings that we got. Those taught us, like, oh, okay, I have to figure this out on my own. Well, I don't think that little babies are really good at figuring things out on their own. So those coping skills are kind of what we carry on into adulthood. And so just learning, like, oh, I recognized how many fights we had in my marriage because of that feeling of like, but you're never here when I need you, which wasn't true. But the times that he wasn't there, that like I actually, like a real thing, like one time early on in this learning, my dog had a seizure at home, and I was like the only adult in the situation. Listen, that not enough narrative can get really loud for me. And so I really was like, I can't deal with this by myself. Okay, well, the man just happens to be at work while this happened. And, I do all of my work from home. So, like, it's not his fault he wasn't here. But, ooh, in my mind, I'm, you neglected me. Like, you're just never here when I need you. Because I can remember all the times that I was left to deal with something by myself, which is really scary for someone who feels like they're not enough. And so the not enough kind of plays into that neglect wound. And so just learning that stuff, having a name for it, a face for it, a shape for it, a texture even, like whatever it is, okay, I can recognize this. Well, then when you recognize it, it's easy when it comes up to be like, oh, because I had to learn there's a huge difference between I feel betrayed and you betrayed me. Because that, and then there's the whole conversation of victim consciousness, which was a real big deal for me. But yeah, so just kind of learning that stuff really, I mean, that was the beginning. And then I've, of course, met a bunch of spiritual folk, met a bunch of therapists, and I just learned something new all the time. But truly, it was the point at which I had decided I've tried for 43 years to get this figured out, and it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to, and decided that my children would be better off without me at that point. That I was like scared into, because I was very serious about that. Like the first time in my life, made a plan, all of the things. And because I chose a date that was kind of far off, because I wanted to get through birthdays and holidays. Um, it gave me a chance to be like, oh, honey, like you need some help. And I had no trust in the mental health community because I think it was just a protective layer. I had never really shared any of my stuff with anyone. I had shared lots of stories, but in a very disconnected way. I wasn't connected to any of those stories. And so I'm only just now working through the ways that I really have so many protective layers between me and everyone else. And so I've really worked on like breaking those down, but I didn't trust anyone with my stuff. I just didn't. And so it really was just me figuring it out step by step, moment by moment, getting to the point where like I felt peace for the first time in my life.
Yeah, well, so many things I thought of that I wanted to mention, but one thing I wanted to point out is the healing through podcasting has been insane for me as well. The guests that have come on, the amount that I've learned, the amount of insight that I've gained is just, it's
Yes.
so cool. So I wanted to say that I appreciate that, and I totally get that. I will say for our generation, like you mentioned, the neglect that, and mom, I know you listen to this podcast. I know this is not a direct hit at you, but this is just the generation that
It just is what it
we,
is.
yeah, it's what it was, like we would come home, and my sister and I was taking care of my little sister, and we
Mm-hmm.
were reheating food, and we were figuring out how to get our homework done. And that's just part of it. Another thing I wanted to say quick before I go on that tangent is my sister and I actually almost also burnt our house down. So that might be, we did. My dad was asleep. I don't know what time this was, but we were obsessed with fire for whatever reason. And we used to love to stick our fingers in, if there's a candle lit, we love to stick our fingers into the wax.
Yes.
It's so weird.
What
So
is
we were
wrong with us? We did that too.
I don't know. I don't know. But she was moving one candle over to somewhere else, and she had a tissue paper underneath it to catch any of the wax that would drip. And of course it dripped and it burnt her hand. So she like let go of the tissue, and the tissue caught on fire. So she dropped everything onto our couch, and the
Oh.
couch caught on fire. The couch caught on fire. So I'm running to the door. We were taught things in school of like, don't say like, "Hey dad, wake up." You just start yelling, "Fire, fire, fire." We're trying to
Yeah.
wake him up. By the time he came out, they made stuff different back then. So we had a nice fire retardant couch. So it burnt a big hole on the arm, but it burnt out. So our house did not burn up, but
Thank
we
goodness.
did almost, I guess. But okay, so back to the more serious topic of the like feeling neglected as a kid. As an adult, I would visualize what I call the pits of despair. And I think that
Mhm.
I've taken that a little bit from the Princess Bride, and then maybe there's some Star Wars stuff in there too. But if something happened where didn't reach what I thought I should be, then I would go down into the pits of despair. Failed
Mhm.
relationships, I would go into the pits of despair of like just self loathing. And it was awful. It was a horrible place to be. It wasn't nice to be
Yeah.
there, but it was familiar.
Yep.
And that's what I was thinking, what you were mentioning. It's a familiar place to be, that betrayal place, neglected place. It's very familiar. And we go there and you sit there and it's awful. It's sad. You don't want to be there. But
Mhm.
if I'm not in it, I'm not familiar with this place outside of the pits when this
Right.
bad thing happens. So I totally get that. I totally get that. I haven't been in the pits in a long time, like a couple of years, which
Yeah.
isn't a long time, but it's
Well, it is if you were so familiar with it, like, regularly. 2 years is a
mhm.
long time to live. I mean, and I totally get what you're saying because even just like I've talked about this way too much in the last week, but I I was experiencing a few days of just kind of like melancholy. Like I was just like, what's going on? I feel kind of sad. But then I decided like I don't really care why because nothing's happening to create it. So, like sometimes you just got to coexist with a feeling or an emotion or whatever. And like astrology's whack right now. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to allow this to be and it is what it is and whatever. But it did make me think like I used to feel like this times 100 all the time. Like I just cycled through complete elation because I would get hyper focused on something, anything like a task or something in the future, whatever, even if it was a goal, whatever it was, hyper focused, and then chemical depletion because all of those chemicals have now been released. My dopamine's gone, chemical depletion. And then the narratives are when the chemical depletion, it registered kind of as boredom or loneliness. And then the narrative there was like, well, yeah, because no one wants to be around you because you're like a horrible person, So like I would just get lower. Then I would turn on the depressing music to help, process. But like really, it was just like, let's just get, it was the only way to like, I knew how to experience feelings was through like listening to sad music. But it was just a perpetual cycle. And then, I'd muster up the courage to try again. I'd get that hyper focus on something. And none of it was real. It was just like this never ending loop of chemical highs and lows, which I mean is why I have such a hard time with like some diagnoses in therapy, because I'm like, yes, and it can be just a natural process if you don't know how to manage those things. Because now when I recognize I'm at a chemical low, like today I'm doing about 5 hours of this between my show and like other people's, and I'm going to and then I also have 2 therapy clients this evening. I'm going to be wiped from that by the time I go to sleep, because when I do this, I get a lot of good stuff, like a lot of dopamine, a lot of serotonin, all the good things happen. What comes up must come down. So I already know to prepare for a chemical low. I would have called that depression before, but it's just depletion. That's all it is. And I've learned now how to take care of myself through those. I know I usually have to be like, will you come cuddle me for a minute? I know I need some physical comfort. I know I need comfort food like soups and a little sugar, and but I also know that I have to have some fruits and vegetables because I got to get that strength back up for tomorrow. I know how to deal with those things now, whereas before it was just this nonstop loop of like rinse repeat of really happy, really depressed.
Yeah, I am very familiar with that cycle myself, and it was like I would also listen to sad music as like, okay, there's the pit. I have to get
Yeah.
myself down there.
Yes.
You know,
I gotta climb in
let me
deeper, baby.
let me get like I'm not going to go anywhere for the next 3 days. I'm not going to wash my hair. I'm not going to take a shower. I'm just going to sit here and mope.
Yes.
Maybe I'm going to
Uh-huh.
watch some movies that make me cry
Yeah, movies that
while
are
listening
just
to,
gonna make this way worse. Uh-huh.
yeah, let me get as
Mm-hmm.
low as I possibly can go and just sit there
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
wallow.
I think this is generational, don't you think?
I think
I think this is
so.
what we all did,
Yeah.
truly. I mean, unless you were just the super, like, I'm avoidant, you're avoidant, but the other people, they must be hyper avoidant if like if they didn't do that. Like the people that you met that were just like seemed always happy, but they weren't. You know what I mean? But like this is kind of, first of all, Nirvana gave us permission to sit around and listen to music and cry. Okay.
That's right.
So that's where our generation grunge music came in at the perfect time for us, where it said, hey, let me help you experience your sadness. Okay. I'll give you something to be sad about, even. And
Yeah.
so, like, really, I do think it's so generational. Because then also, if you think about all the movies that were popular at the time, too, like in the 90s and stuff, I mean, You've Got Mail, Sleepless in Seattle. Like there's all of these things that you could watch and just get really sad. Even though the ending was like decent, it's still like I feel kind of crappy after watching that, but that's why we went to those movies if we were in a sad mood.
That's right. Steel Magnolias was my favorite. I mean, I would just sit
Girl,
beside.
no, yes. The trauma. I still won't watch. I have a friend who will watch it every single time it comes on. I cannot relive Shelby. I cannot.
I had a dog named Shelby.
I bet you did.
I
I bet you
did.
did. Yep. Yep. I
Oh
can't
my
watch her die
God.
anymore.
Oh, it's awful. It's
It
awful.
was awful. Like, I just remember being like, what? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And just sob every time. So one thing you said like a long time ago, and
Mm-hmm.
you didn't, I don't even know if you actually said these words, but you were talking about when you're growing up and in spite of your aunts and your grandmother
Oh.
of like achieving, I think maybe in my head I put it, achieve equals love. And I think that maybe
Mm-hmm.
again, another generational thing that we have put
Mm-hmm.
on ourselves of if I'm the best, I'll be loved. And that's where my pits of despair come back into play of
Yeah.
if I don't do this good enough, if I'm in a relationship and he doesn't want to be with me anymore, then I'm not good enough. I have to be
Yes.
perfect. I have to do all of this so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. And, for me, unraveling all that perfectionism, oh, it took so long. I'm sure it's still showing up, just not as actively or presently as it used to. But yeah, I had to really like investigate because, like, you know, the good thing about having a podcast and having experts come on is like, I'll just get free advice from them all the time, right? So I had a relationship girl on one time and she was really fun. So I was like, "Hey, actually I'm in a fight with my husband right now. So let me talk to you about that." And so I did, and by the end of the conversation what I recognized was that I wasn't even still upset about the fight. I was upset that I wasn't perfect, that I let it get a little messy. You know what I mean? Like, I think we all reach this phase in our healing where we're like, I know better, I do better, right? And in some ways that's going to be true. Like, yeah, I'm not a raging psycho anymore, but I'm still bitchy, and that didn't go away magically. And I thought
Mm.
it would, but like we kind of start to judge our healing. I've seen that with clients too, where like about 6 weeks in, because they've really expanded some consciousness, like they're doing pretty well. And then they're like, I made a mistake and I just feel like I should be further along. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so fun to get to see this in other people, because then I can see how this also shows up in my life. And I don't even realize it. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it's as much generational as it is family systems. Like there's always going to be a golden child who thinks that that's their role. They learn very early on through comparison with siblings or other family members that, like, oh, you do not receive love when you do that. I'm going to do this. I mean, or the opposite, even like, oh, you get that, I'm going to do it better. But in our family system, my older brother was the scapegoat. And so he couldn't do anything right. And I was like, oh, let me not do anything like that. And I just learned really young. And also, it was weird because, like, my mom, I was the only one she was physically abusive with. And it's interesting. I don't know if it's the dynamic between moms and boys that, because boys are kind of sweeter when they're younger. I was sweet. I don't know. I don't know what the deal was, but she'd beat the hell out of me. But she didn't do that to them. She would cuss at them. She'd, be in their face or whatever. But she did that with me too, but she also would beat me. But like, I I think that, like, the contrast between, like, my grandma tried to nurture my strength too and tried to comfort me and tried in her best ability, but the baby, whew, I mean, he was the comedian of the family, and he was, the tension breaker and whatever. Truly, I was the golden child, but he was the favorite. Like, he could not do a damn thing wrong to her. Like, it was like whatever. And then it was kind of like that, like with my mom too, but I just was completely insignificant. And I think that some of it was some jealousy over the relationship between my grandma and me. She had been a caregiver off and on for me since I was 2 months old. So, like, I didn't have that attachment to my mom the way I did my grandma, in terms of like authority, um It was weird. I don't know. Like, you're my mom and I love you, but like, I know that I can't rely on you for anything. So this is who I go to for comfort and whatever. I longed and craved for that type of thing with my mom, but I knew, like, this is where I get that. You don't give me that. But I think, yeah, every family system has these different dynamics, and girls especially tend to learn very young that if I achieve, I get praise, and praise feels good, and this is kind of the only thing I can do right. And then there are those girls who are high achieving who can't do anything right, which honestly was kind of the case for me. If it made her look good, it was cool that I was doing something, but like, I could not do anything right in my grandma's eyes. I mean, truly, like, I am sure that, when I was younger, she praised me and whatever, but any of my success threatened her. So she just felt, you know, gross at any of my achievements, and then lashed out at me. My degrees were just a piece of paper. So I
Yeah.
was like, piece of paper you don't have, grandma, but whatever.
So, okay. So you've written a couple books, but one of them does talk about good is not, or good is enough. I was just about to say good is not enough.
Good is not enough. Yeah, good is enough. Yeah, so I've been creating these little instant download workbooks for about 5 months now, 5 or 6. Every month I put out a new workbook, and they're like super cheap, they're easy to access, and it's each one has a different theme. Good is enough is to work on perfectionism, and it's got like daily practices. I really like to talk about the difference between like an affirmation and like an invocation or a decree, because affirmations are beautiful and they can rewire your brain, but if you don't believe them, you're just affirming a lie. So like, I really like you to step into like invoke or decree, decide for yourself right here, right now, this is going to be. And then you just make a bunch of daily decisions to confirm that. Then you can affirm, because you start to believe it deeply. But yeah, so each of my little workbooks, they have a different theme and different practices. I do a lot of like somatic practices to get you back into your body, because the number one thing that trauma does is just separate you from your body. And I like to say, like, we're like little floating balloons attached to our bodies with a string, because we just learn how to jump up into our head and try to escape, try to numb, try to intellectualize, try to rationalize, try to analyze. We don't know how to feel and be one with ourselves. And so each of my workbooks has a small somatic component, shadow work, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, I'm having fun putting those out.
How do people get them if they want?
Um, let's see. On Instagram, I'm really active, and my link tree is there, and all of them are linked there. I was trying to think. I was linking each of them individually on my website as well, but it just got a little overwhelming, so I took most of them down from there. Also, I have a Patreon for the show, and I actually have 2 shows, but the other one I have with a co-host. But on Emotionally Unavailable, the Patreon, there's a $10 tier. And so in that tier, you get ad-free episodes, but you also get my monthly workbook included. And that's $5 cheaper than, because I sell them for $14.44. So you save a little bit by just subscribing. And then it's an automatic, you just go and download whenever it comes out. It comes out, the end of the third week of every month usually. And then it, like, if you subscribe to the Patreon, you get whatever that month's is, and the back ones that I've uploaded there. I only just started uploading to Patreon probably like three months ago, if that. So I've included a couple of the back ones so that you can get some stuff for free if you subscribe. But that's a benefit of that. But they are easy to find. I'm at melissa.hepner on Instagram. That's the social I'm the most active on. I post stuff on Facebook, but I hate Facebook so much because that's where I know people in real life, and they drive me absolutely insane. And so, I try to stay off of there, but Instagram I'm pretty active on, and my link tree is there, and it can get you to anything you want with me.
Okay. And then what's your podcast again? You said you have 2 of them, but
Emotionally Unavailable is the podcast I do by myself, and it really is just kind of my journey to growth and evolution. I mean, it started out as a way to discuss trying to become more vulnerable. because that was the only thing I was aware of at the time, is that I had a tough time being vulnerable. And then it's transformed. I have a lot of different types of people on, but they're really like organic conversations like this, and just kind of, connecting on in a very authentic manner. And yeah, I think they're beautiful. I think it's a great show. And then I have Unquiet Soul with my co-host Angie Hawkins. I met her on my show too. She's super fun, and it's more lighthearted, I feel like, because we can go real deep on Emotionally Unavailable. And so Unquiet Soul, I talk about like some astrology stuff. We talk about whatever's going on in our lives that week, like what lessons we've learned that week, things like that. And it's fun. It's a fun show.
Okay, that sounds very fun. All right, so
Yeah.
Instagram is probably the best place to go.
Probably, yeah, because it's
Okay.
got my link tree there for every single link you at my website, the show. It's got Apple link, Spotify link, YouTube link. I have a little shop online. It's got links to that. Like anything you could possibly want to do with me would be there.
Okay, I have loved this conversation. This has been fun, but I know if I don't say we need to wrap up, then we'll never wrap up. So
We will not, yeah.
wrapping up, is there any specific words of encouragement or wisdom or just lasting thoughts that you would like to leave with listeners today?
Yeah, and listen, if you see clips of me talking, I say this a lot, but please know that every time I say it, I mean it just as genuinely as the first time it came out of my mouth. You are great exactly how you are, right here, right now. You don't have to change every last thing about yourself to find peace or healing or to be healed. We don't heal because that's the point. We heal so that we can get the most joy, love, and abundance out of this life. And you deserve that. You're worthy of that. You were born with every ounce of worth that you're ever going to have, which is a lot. And nothing external of you changes your worth or value as a human. So, yes, you probably do need to unbecome a lot of the things the world told you to be. Probably, so that you can become who you actually came here to be. Be you. You're exactly who you need to be. All those things that we look at like flaws or failures, they're part of your magic. And it's kind of like the butterfly effect, where you see the point of it later. So maybe you're on the spectrum, maybe you've been in a bunch of crap relationships, maybe you feel like the worst mom ever, maybe you don't know how to deal with a crisis by yourself. Every single thing that you have just criticized yourself to death for, I promise you, you will find a positive in it when you work through your trauma and find peace for yourself. You will see the point later, because those are your gifts and you can use them freely as the minute you start to embrace them. And life really is for love. Learn to love yourself unconditionally and find that unconditional positive regard, because everything changes then. And you become an unshakable, unmovable force in this universe when you do that.
Thank you so much. I think that is something that a lot of us needed to hear. So thank you for those words. Thank you for joining me today, Melissa.
Thank you. I had so much fun.
I did too. We'll have to do this again.
Yes.
Thank you again, Melissa, for joining me today. And thank you, Warriors, for listening. I've included all of the links Melissa was referring to, as well as her 1 in 3 profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong. And wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone.
Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.